Raise your hand if you're feeling overwhelmed right now as you're listening to this. Many of the women I work with, and even some of my closest friends and family members, often talk about being overwhelmed, whether it's between work, family life, relationships, health and fitness. And I know that you're not any stranger to that feeling either. So in this episode of Happy Without Medicine, I'll be sharing some practical strategies that you can use when you start feeling things getting busier for you and you start to feel more tense, more stressed, and more overwhelmed. So enjoy the episode. Welcome to Happy Without Medicine, and I'm your host, Dr. Yuandi, a medical doctor, therapist, and a fierce advocate for your happiness. My mission here is simple: to help professional women just like you create a life you're excited to wake up to. It's time to make the happiness you feel on the inside match the success others see on the outside. Let's get started. Can you remember the last time you felt overwhelmed? For me, I specifically remember that it was just a couple of weeks ago, actually. It was about 10 p.m. and I was still in the kitchen on a weeknight cooking and cleaning. 10 p.m. Usually I like to be done by 8 at the latest. But between working late that day, making 2 or 3 different meals that evening, brainstorming for a presentation I would be giving to my colleagues in a few days, packing to leave for work out of town, preparing for birthdays, and probably a gazillion other things I had going on, I could actually feel the tension rising inside of me. I found myself thinking out loud. Actually, more accurately, I was lamenting to my husband about all the things that I had on my mind. My presentation is just 2 days away, and I haven't even started working on my slides yet. I haven't even booked my hotel for my work trip yet. What will the kids eat while I'm away? What are we going to do for Moya's birthday coming up? To which my husband was like, Yuandi, you're worrying too much and you're doing too much. Ouch. I mean, although I gave him a stare as if to say, it's easy for you to just stand there and be like, well, you're worrying too much and you're doing too much. But to be honest, he was right. I had too much going on and it was causing a lot of rising tension internally that was now spilling out externally. Overwhelm, and I put that in air quotes because for some reason I cringe at the use of that word as a noun. But anyways, overwhelm unfortunately can be a familiar friend to many of us. But in the practical part of this episode, I'm going to share with you some helpful steps that will help you kick overwhelm, again in air quotes, to the curb. So number 1, do a brain dump. And what's a brain dump? A brain dump is basically taking everything that's on your head and putting it down on a piece of paper. And the reason why that's great is because it can help you identify what it is that's contributing to you feeling overwhelmed. It gets all those tasks, all those responsibilities, all those things that you need to do, all those loose ends. It gets it out of your brain and onto a piece of paper and gives you some thinking space to actually start resolving some of these things and going into action. Brain dumping is my personal go-to strategy when I start to feel that tension rising inside of me. And when I put everything down on paper, I can immediately feel the tension being released in my shoulders, in my head. The analogy that I like to give, it's almost like having 60 tabs open on your laptop. And every time you write things down, you're clicking that X and closing that tab. And you write another thing down and you're clicking another X. And one by one, as you get things out of your head, you're closing all those tabs and you're giving your laptop some more capacity to process other things. So you're giving your mind more capacity to process other things, because when you keep thinking about things and running them through your head and going in circles and running the same things over and over in your head, it's using up energy and taking up energy away from being productive and being proactive and going to action and actually solving the problems or getting things done. So when you do a brain dump, you're releasing some capacity to go into action and get things done. And if you want to take things to the next step, because to be honest, inefficient time management is a big contributing factor to feeling overwhelmed. So use your planner and take that brain dump, take the things that you have written down and pull out your planner and start to schedule some of these things that need to get done. Many of us have bought planners at the beginning of the year. We're like January 2020. It's our year. We're going to get things done. We buy the planners and halfway through February, they're under a pile of magazines somewhere. Does anyone still buy magazines these days? I always talk about magazines in my podcasts, but anyways, they're under a pile of something somewhere. We're not actually using the planners anymore. Personally, like I say, I prefer pen and paper, although I sometimes will use my Google Calendar, and I know that I have patients who I work with who love the digital stuff. But as long as you have some sort of system to plan your time and make your time management as efficient as possible. Having a planner is a great way to manage feeling overwhelmed because you can then take the things that you have written down on your brain dump and then slot them into weeks, slot them into various days, slot them into various months even. One big advantage of writing things down is that you can set your priorities because many of the things that we are holding onto in our heads aren't even that important if we're being honest with ourselves. So writing them down, you can reprioritize things and then start to schedule things accordingly. You can schedule what needs to be done urgently. You can maybe delegate some other stuff or completely forget about some other stuff, or you can schedule things for a later time. Okay, so using some sort of planning system to take all the things that you wrote down when you did a brain dump and actually schedule them such that they get resolved and they get done. The third thing is setting your boundaries. And I spoke about boundaries in episode 7, how to say no. So definitely check that out if you haven't listened to it yet. But many of us take on entirely way too much. Someone asks you to host an event and you say, yes, I'll do it. Or they ask you to plan a workshop or babysit or give a presentation. And yes, I know you want to do all these things, but if you're being honest, you just don't have the capacity to do so right now. I always like to remind you that if you are saying yes to something, you're automatically saying no to something else. If you're saying yes to the workshop, if you're saying yes to babysitting, if you're saying yes to hosting events, you're saying no to things like downtime. You're saying no to things like spending quality time with family and friends. So always keep that in mind. When you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else. This happened to me just last week when a dear friend of mine asked me to collaborate with her on doing a live show. And it was a last minute request. And I said, you know what? The only way I can make it work is if we do it at 9 p.m. at night. Because my husband was out of town. I needed to make sure the kids were in bed. I needed to get dressed and situated and all that. So 9 p.m. was the only time I could really do it on that day. And so I said, yeah, maybe 9 p.m. I can kind of make it work. But when I looked at my schedule on that day, I was like, you know what, Yolande, just be real. This is too much for you, which was kind of sad because number one, I love going live. And number two, I know it was for a very good cause. But after really thinking about it, I had to send her a message and say, girl, I'm sorry. I really wish I could go live with you, but I can't. I then offered her alternative dates and she was like, it's no problem at all. No big deal. And we left it at that. So being able to set your boundaries and be honest with yourself and learn how to say no and just really being realistic about your capacity and how much time you have will limit the amount of time we spend feeling overwhelmed. The next point that I want to talk about is staying present. Staying present, because many times we are thinking way too far ahead into the future, worrying about things that, one, we actually cannot control, even though we try to think, okay, what if this happens? Then I'll do this and then I'll do that. And then I have to be prepared for this. The truth is you really don't have as much control as you believe you do. And two, many of the things we worry about never even happened in the end. I remember a woman I was speaking to, she was getting so overwhelmed because she just had a baby, and her in-laws had mentioned in passing to her husband that they were thinking of visiting sometime in the future, and they lived out of town. They actually lived overseas, so that meant probably that they would be staying with this family. And this caused this woman that I was speaking to go into a spiral of worry. She was feeling overwhelmed already. Are they going to stay with us? Should I talk about renting an Airbnb? What are they going to eat while they're here? Should I plan to cook and freeze the food? Should I plan to cater? What am I going to do with the baby? And all these what ifs. She spent a ton of time focusing on the future and all these different permutations of things that were completely out of her control. We spent some time working on how to be present, taking things one thing at a time, trusting her future self to handle it if and when those things actually came up, just saying, hey, future self, you've got this. I'm not even going to spend my time worrying about that. And spending her energy right now on her mental health and on her family. And the funniest part of this is that it turned out that her in-laws never actually came to visit because of health reasons. And so all her worrying was for nothing at the end of the day. And so yes, being overwhelmed is kind of part and parcel of the type of women that we are. We are goal-getters. We are high achievers. We like to get things done. But it doesn't have to stay that way. Being overwhelmed doesn't have to be our default setting. We can do things like brain dumping, using a planner to make sure we're using our time efficiently, setting boundaries, staying present. We can use these strategies to kick feeling overwhelmed to the curb so that we're not staying in that space consistently, and we can continue to enhance our peace and invite calm, confidence, and control into our day-to-day lives. So as usual, I'm going to end this episode with a quote by singer, songwriter, and guitarist Phoebe Snow, which says, "Sometimes when you're overwhelmed in a situation, that's when your priorities are reordered." And I strongly believe that. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you found it helpful, then go ahead and share it with a friend. Maybe it's a friend who comes to you constantly complaining and lamenting about feeling overwhelmed, or maybe you guys co-lament together. You complain about feeling overwhelmed and then she complains about feeling overwhelmed. Right? Share this with a friend and I'm sure they'll also find it helpful just as you have found it helpful. Until next time, remember that I am here, fiercely advocating for your happiness. Take care. Thank you for joining me, Dr. Yewande, on the Happy Without Medicine podcast this week. If you enjoyed this episode, I would so appreciate it if you could give it a review on Apple Podcast because it helps Happy Without Medicine pop up when other women are searching for ways to find their happiness again. And visit happywithoutmedicine.com to view the complete show notes and other resources mentioned in today's episode. I'll catch you next time.